By the end of this video, you will have a specific set of criteria for deciding whether a bare, featureless stretch of bank is worth your time or not. Not a gut feeling, not a guess, but an actual checklist you can run before you make a single cast. That matters because the spots that look empty are the ones that almost no one fishes, and that alone changes the math. Visible cover, dock pilings, fallen trees, laydowns, gets worked over constantly. The fish that live there are conditioned to pressure. The fish sitting over a subsurface bottom change 40 feet down the bank from where everyone else is standing have never seen a lure in their lives. The problem is that there is no obvious reason to stop there. The bank looks like nothing. No shadow, no wood, no structure you can point at. So you walk past, or you keep retrieving, and never slow down long enough to read what is actually underneath. This video covers 3 things: what subsurface features make a bare bank worth fishing even when it shows nothing on the surface, how to read those features from the bank without electronics, and the one timing variable that turns a barren stretch from a travel lane into a feeding station. None of this requires a boat. None of it requires a depth finder. It requires knowing what to look for. And that is what the next few minutes are for. Here is the invisible cost of walking past a featureless bank. You are not just missing one fish. You're skipping the fish that have specifically chosen that location because it is not being pressured. Bass Resource documents this directly. Bass stacked along irregular subsurface contours on flat-looking banks are, by definition, the fish that most anglers never target. The ones holding over a creek channel swing tucked tight against an otherwise unremarkable shoreline are there in part because there is no fallen tree to announce their position, no dock to draw eyes, nothing that says, "Cast here," to anyone walking the bank. And that already tells you something. If a fish is sitting in what looks like open, empty water, there is a reason it chose that spot over everywhere else on that bank. The reason is almost always something you cannot see from the surface: a bottom transition, a subtle depth change, a hidden channel edge running within reach of where you are standing. Those subsurface features attract baitfish, and the bass follow. That is where the first layer of reading starts, not with what the bank looks like above the waterline, but with what the bottom is doing directly beneath it. But bottom composition alone does not explain everything. There is a second variable, one that shifts independently of structure, that determines whether the fish at that spot are positioned to bite or positioned to pass through. And understanding the difference between those two states changes how long you fish any single stretch of apparently empty bank. Take one specific type of bank: a long, flat shoreline with no visible wood, no overhanging brush, no docks, nothing that registers as structure to the eye. From 20 feet away, it looks like the worst water on the lake. Now work through it in layers, because each layer gives you a different read on whether that bank is likely to hold fish. The first layer is bottom composition. Bass Resource states plainly that bass prefer hard bottoms over silted muck, and a hard bottom is not always visible from the surface. What you can feel is the transition, where the drag on a jig or soft plastic changes as it crosses from clay to gravel, from sand to packed mud. A bottom composition change on an otherwise featureless bank is a boundary. Baitfish and crawfish concentrate at boundaries because the forage base is different on each side. The bass are there because the food is. You will not see it. You will feel it on the retrieve, usually as a subtle resistance change when the lure stops sinking the same way. That shift deserves a second cast before you move. The second layer is what is running underneath that flat bank, specifically whether a creek or river channel swings close to the shoreline at any point along that stretch. Mystery Tackle Box describes this directly. Barren banks near a creek or river channel swing are among the most consistently productive featureless banks on any lake, precisely because they sit adjacent to a deep water highway. Bass moving from winter, holding areas toward spawning flats use creek channels as migration routes. When that channel bends close to the bank, the fish have a reason to stop. Bassmasters' reporting on bass migration patterns confirms that staging fish will hold on the last significant depth change before entering shallower spawning areas, and that last change is often a channel swing against a bank that looks completely unremarkable from above. Bass Blog documents the same pattern. Bass follow the channel, pause at the swing where it approaches the bank, and may sit there for days before making the final move into shallower water. A flat bank with a channel swing running within 15 feet of it is not empty water. It is a staging area that happens to have no visible cover. The third layer is the depth immediately adjacent to the bank itself, specifically whether that shallow flat drops off quickly or gradually within casting range. Practical Fishin' notes that a bank may look bare from 50 yards away, but when you stop and study it, there is almost always something. Where the bank becomes flatter or steeper, where it makes a slow turn, where an underwater feature gives fish a reason to pause. A bank that drops quickly from 2 feet to 8 feet within your casting range gives bass exactly what they look for year-round: quick access between shallow feeding water and deeper holding depth without traveling far. Bass Fishing Blueprint documents this directly. The strongest holding spots on any bank combine at least 2 of these variables. A flat that drops into depth is good. A flat that drops into depth and has a creek channel swinging near it is better. Add a bottom composition change, and you have a spot that can hold fish across multiple seasons without a single piece of visible cover to announce it. The fourth layer is sun angle and bank orientation, which determines whether a bare flat warms faster than surrounding water. Bass Resource documents that in early spring, south and southwest-facing banks warm more quickly than shaded or north-facing banks on the same lake. Warming water on a flat, featureless bank concentrates baitfish before any visible vegetation or structure has a chance to do the same. Bass Resource recommends targeting north and northeast banks, specifically in the northern hemisphere during spring, where sun exposure is highest. An angler who walks that bank in early March, seeing no cover and moving on, has left behind water that is 2 or 3 degrees warmer than the shaded bank 40 yards away. And in that temperature range, that difference controls where the fish are sitting. The fifth layer is fishing pressure itself, which is structural in a different sense. A bare bank with nothing to look at draws no one. Wired Two Fish's material on featureless grass lakes makes the same point about concentrating fish by finding areas of change that other anglers ignore. The fish on a truly featureless-looking bank that holds one or more of the subsurface variables described above have learned nothing about lures, are not conditioned to line pressure, and have not been spooked off their holding position by a procession of anglers working the obvious dock 50 yards down the bank. That combination, real subsurface reason to be there, zero angling pressure, is what makes these banks capable of producing fish that feel genuinely surprised. Now run the practical test on any featureless bank you walk. First cast. Retrieve a jig or soft plastic slowly across the bottom and pay attention to what it tells you. A smooth, consistent retrieve says uniform bottom. Move along the bank and repeat. A change in resistance, a subtle deflection, or a difference in sink rate says the bottom shifted. Mark that spot mentally and make 2 more casts in each direction from it to define the boundary. Second question. Before you arrived, did you check whether a creek arm or channel runs near this section of shoreline? A topographic map or satellite image of the lake before your outing will show this. If the answer is yes and the channel swings within 15 to 20 feet of the bank at any point, That is your primary target zone, regardless of what the surface looks like. Third question: how does this bank drain into depth? Wade the first step in if the water is accessible, or count your lure's sink rate on successive casts closer to the bank. A bank that gets deep quickly within 40 feet of shore gives bass the combination of shallow feeding access and nearby safety that keeps them in that area rather than passing through. These three questions: what is the bottom doing? Where is the nearest channel? And how fast does it drop? Can be answered without electronics, without a boat, and without seeing a single piece of visible cover. Each one independently makes a bare bank worth more than a quick cast. All three together make it worth staying. Every variable covered in this video, bottom composition, channel proximity, depth access, sun angle, pressure history, is real, and each one matters independently. But here is what tends to get missed. The fish reading that spot is evaluating all of them at once, not one at a time. A bare bank with only a channel swing nearby, but a soft, silted bottom, and no quick depth access is a travel lane. Bass pass through it. A bare bank with hard bottom and quick depth access, but no channel nearby, is an incidental holding spot. Fish may pause there, but they are not staged there. The version of this bank that holds fish consistently is the one where the bottom is hard. The channel swings close. The depth change is rapid, and the sun has had time to warm it. When all of those are true at the same location, the story the bank is telling is consistent. And a consistent story is the only reason a base has to stay rather than keep moving. That is the actual read. Not any single variable, but whether the variables are pointing at the same conclusion. A channel swing against a hard bottom bank that faces the right direction and drops quickly is not a lucky spot. It is a spot where the environment has given a base multiple reasons to stop, and none of those reasons are visible from where you are standing. The fish that uses an edge to ambush is choosing that edge because its lateral line, which can track prey movement through water disturbance alone, tells it that bait fish travel that boundary. The bait fish travel that boundary because of the bottom change and the depth gradient. The depth gradient is there because of the channel. Pull any one of those out, and the story has a hole in it. Leave all of them in place, and that bank will produce fish in multiple seasons with no cover in sight. If you have tried fishing bare banks before without results, this video probably explains why. Not because the fish were not there, but because one or two of these variables were missing and the story was incomplete. There are more videos here that follow the same approach. No miracle spots, no magic retrieve, just the actual logic behind where fish are and why. Subscribing makes sure those videos show up when you need them. Before the next time you walk a bare bank and decide it is not worth your time, run the 3-question protocol. First, what is the bottom doing under your lure? A composition change is a boundary, and boundaries hold fish. Second, is there a creek or river channel within 15 to 20 feet of this bank at any point? If yes, that is your primary stopping area, before you ever see a bite. Third, does this bank give bass quick access between shallow and deep water within your casting range? If all three answers are yes, slow down. Make 10 casts before you move instead of 2. The fish at that spot have heard nothing, seen nothing, and have every subsurface reason to be exactly there. The only variable you control is whether you give that bank enough time to